Hello, traders. Welcome back to another Sunday special. Hope you're doing well and hope you had a nice weekend. We are going to be doing some standard Sunday stuff, which is talking about trade setups and ideas for the week ahead. If you're new to my channel, then what I do here every Sunday is I go through a list of currency pairs and commodities and markets that I am personally watching for the week ahead. And I talk about setups or ideas. Now, last week was huge because the US dollar had an absolute crazy good week, seeing some gains that we haven't seen these kind of movements on the dollar in quite some time. In fact, we broke through a number of key resistance points that about a week ago I was pretty bearish on, but now looking very, very bullish. So I want to just reiterate, if you missed some of the content last week, if you're just catching up to speed, the dollar had an incredible run up off of the news from the Fed. Was in a very short way of saying it, they were talking about raising rates sooner than expected and at a faster pace, talking about 2 rate hikes by the end of 2023, which is a very different tune than what we were hearing from the Fed prior to that. This is probably in response to the concerns around inflation and just an overall economic outlook that's looking pretty good for the US. So that has me pretty bullish on the dollar. That's a catalyst for me that I am pretty much willing to be looking for long setups on some dollar crosses, which we will definitely be taking a look at today in this video. So with that said, let's take a look at the week ahead really quick. So this is basically what we've got on the docket. We've got flash PMI surveys for the US, UK, Euro, and the Japanese / Australia as well. We'll take a first look at the state of the global economy in June, with investors paying close attention to any signs of a persistent surge in price pressures. Also, central banks in the UK, China, Philippines, Thailand, Mexico will be deciding on the course of monetary policy. So a big one there is China and the UK for sure, unless you trade something like the Mexican peso. Other important releases include US final Q1 GDP, durable goods, and PCE data, Canada and Mexico retail sales, UK and EU consumer morale, and Australia retail sales. Very busy week. Lots of stuff going on. Some of the key ones that I see here, of course, is going to be retail sales out of the UK, EU, and Australia. GDP being a big news event that could be market moving. And of course, anything that has monetary policy in it can be impactful as well. So lots of stuff to pay attention to this week in terms of the news side of things, but we will definitely be doing some technical analysis as well, talking about setups and things to think about. So before I do want to mention, you guys, by the way, I mentioned last week that there was a 40% off gold membership sale going on for our premium group. This is our gold membership, which is our all-included package, basically. We are doing that as sort of like a kickoff for the summer. If you're not already, this is your last chance to get that 40% off price before it is no longer available. By the way, inside of our private Discord, you get access to all of our trade alerts, our chat room access, our weekly in-depth research that we do as a team. We've got a couple of different people who are writing and creating content exclusive for our members. We also have live coaching webinars with Joe Barreca, who is an Australian trader of 14 years, very nice guy, veteran trader himself, answers questions throughout the week. And then, of course, our strategy and software library. So again, I don't mean to repeat myself, but if you haven't already gotten this sale, there's a promo code and a link down below in the description. If you have any interest in joining us, now is your chance to do so for the very best price that you're probably going to get for many, many months. So check it out. If you've been meaning to join us, there's your chance. Don't miss it. Okay, so with that said, dollar bullishness, definitely what I am looking for. I'm looking for more upside on the US dollar, but I want to show you guys a few things here. So if we take a look, for example, at something like USD CAD. USD CAD has a lot of room to retrace, and in fact has made some really key movements here. We pulled back all the way to the 61.8 retracement that I had talked about a month ago, right? I had talked about this, like the idea of if this thing pulls back, maybe I'd look to short it. But then when the news actually came, the news was so bullish that I completely avoided selling anything here. And I'm glad I did, because again, this thing was a rolling train, and jumping in front of it was just super dangerous. So I chose not to. I chose to completely stay on the sidelines with dollar CAD. Although I am bullish on the Canadian currency and the US currency, I am not willing to really trade these things because, again, if I'm bullish on both, I don't really love to trade that currency pair. I'd prefer to trade something where I'm bullish on one currency and bearish on its cross. So, for example, the dollar yen. The dollar yen has been hot on my watch list. It's been something that I'm actively trading myself inside of the private group. I actually called out a trade this last week. It didn't really go too far. I got stopped out once and then I re-entered and made a little bit of money. So, we will see how that one plays out this week, but dollar yen definitely big on my watch list. Let me clean up my things here a little bit and give you guys an idea. So I think that this level could hold. We'll see if that does hold, but I like this area here at 110.2 for potential long side action on the dollar yen. I am bullish on the dollar and I am bearish on the yen. So bringing those two together gives me a currency pair that meets my criteria for an entry. That is based not solely on technicals, but also with the fundamental analysis that I do inside of the private group. Every trade that I share comes with, my full fundamental breakdown, as well as my technical reasoning behind each trade. So from a technical perspective, it's fairly simple here. We're in a nice uptrend. We're putting in higher lows. Price broke through that level with conviction off of that news last week from the Fed. And now on the retracement, I am looking for buying opportunities. Now, if I don't get it here, if things don't work out here, I may be willing to try and look again at further levels lower, retracements to this trend line as it goes up higher on the 4-hour chart. I do like the idea of looking for, retracements here. Anything that is dipping to me is currently looking like a buy. And so that is what I'm looking at. Now with the dollar, I'm kind of thinking, bullishness for the next month or so. That's kind of the idea. Now from there, not too sure where we see. We'll have to process what goes on as it goes along. But for my time frame for trading as a swing trader, I'm going to be looking for dollar bullish setups until further notice. And I really love this one. I think that there's probably some good risk reward somewhere in this area. Now, of course, please remember, this is not me telling you to go take these trades. This is just me telling you, what I am currently looking at. Now, we do have resistance up at the top here. So what I would say is that a natural place for price to retest, should things get bullish going into the week, would be a move back to the previous high, somewhere around 111. That could be on the radar. Something like that could be in play. And from there may be even setups, further. So let's say that I was in a trade here on the long side and things worked out very well. And we even broke through that point. I could see myself, if we did a straight run up, like just an absolute bullish setup, I could even see myself adding at a higher point on a pullback, right? So that is something that I will do occasionally on my trades where I'm very bullish on something, is I'm looking to see, hey, can I look to add if things are going really, really well? And so, I'll watch for that with dollar yen going into this week. Definitely something that is on my radar for sure. So dollar yen looking really good. What about euro dollar? Whoops, I spelled that wrong. Euro USD. So euro dollar absolutely took a dive off of a cliff this week. This thing just absolutely fell apart. And in fact, these levels of support that we had before, now we have to change them back to resistance or supply. And you can see quickly, this thing looks very, very bearish. Now, I want to show you guys one more thing from the website. We'll head over to a1trading.com. Feel free to use this anytime you want. We put out free content all the time. And then go to retail sentiment here. So retail sentiment has some interesting things to tell us about the euro. Look at this. The euro right now is 15% of retail traders are short and 84% are long. Now, the reason that is impactful and meaningful to me is that when the retail crowd is all piled into one side of a trade, it's a little bit dangerous for me to try and go with them. If they're all going long, I would be more willing to go short rather than long with them. Why? Because retail traders usually lose. And although it totally could rebound, we could see a retracement back higher for the euro dollar. I think that the most likely scenario is that the retail traders, they get caught on the wrong side of trades quite often. So for me, looking at euro dollar this week, I would love to see further downside, or at the very least, if I wanted to short this thing, retracements. So things like this, 1.2 looks very, very interesting for potential short setups. And I think that what you've got here is you've probably got a move if the dollar is able to stay, if it's able to stay very, very strong. A move down to 1.17 could even be in the book. So right around there at the previous low, I guess 1.72 is a more accurate area. So we'll mark this as well on the chart just for future sake. So should things really get strong to the downside, if sellers are really in control here coming into the week, we could head right on down to that point. And this will resurface when we talk about gold in just a minute here. This idea of just complete downside control by sellers, it's one of those things. If I was a buyer, if I was looking to be buying the euro dollar, I would at least have to see some signs of rejection, because this thing is in just a massive sell-off. And again, catching a falling knife can be a very dangerous approach in trading, because again, this thing has a lot of momentum right now. There's a lot of day traders who, profited off of shorting this thing and riding the downside throughout the day. And so, jumping in front of that can be very dangerous. So for me, I think that the best swing trade opportunities would be, like I said, a retracement, looking for pullbacks there, and still maintaining that bearish thesis down to 1.175, let's say. So I think that it's a natural place for price to go. Will it go there this week? Maybe not. Depends on the volatility levels. If we see high levels of volatility and news and everything going on, yes, it's very possible we could see a spike down to that point. But if things are a little bit calmer than they were last week, which is a pretty likely scenario, usually, you see volatility expand and then sort of shrink. Right here's like an example where you see a big volatility expansion and then it just sort of went quiet again. And then, so on and so forth. So it is possible that we could see more downside this week. We could see the expansion or the volatility continue to be high, but good chance we also see a little bit more calm waters this week. So we will see how that happens. If that does occur, there could be, like I said, some good setups in the midst of that. I think pound dollar is also one to watch this week. Pound dollar, such a steep sell-off here. The dollar got so strong against this one. You can see breaking out of consolidation and just continuing there lower. When I'm looking at pound dollar, I don't think I see any reason to be buying this thing until, if I was to buy it, it would be probably a move at 1.37 could be interesting. But again, even then, I still like the dollar long now. So I have a tough time jumping in front of this thing. I think a lot of the levels that were support, we've now got to change them to supply, which again, when you're seeing new supply levels and new areas being formed, it's sort of a bearish market, right? So again, pound dollar, I think if you start to see bottoming out, that could be a big signal. But I will say on the daily chart, this is pretty scary for this uptrend, because remember, we talked about this idea for a long time on my streams and on my channel. Maybe you saw them in old videos. I talked about this level and watching for the break. If it was to break, I'd be very interested in something like this, but we never got it. In fact, we sold off at resistance, forming a pretty clear double top. If we draw in a long-term upward trend line, you can see structure here on the pound dollar has really been broken. Now, it doesn't mean that it can't find a bottom locally. It can't enter into a range-bound market for a while, but I think that the strong uptrend, at least for now, is sort of dead. So again, I'm not rushing to buy the pound dollar. Now, I still like the UK. I like the pound, but trading it against something like the pound yen, much more appetizing to me, which actually brings me to one of my favorite setups going into the week, which is pound yen at 61.8 retracement. I love this one long because you're talking about something that is in a strong uptrend overall, still maintaining an uptrend. You've got the 200-day moving average still looking good. You've got the 100 and the 50 all lining up, pulling back here to a nice level. So I like this one long a lot more than I do the pound dollar. Now, it doesn't mean I'm going to rush in here, because again, this thing is on a falling structure, really strong to the downside. So I'm not rushing to jump into this one, but if we see something on the lower time frames, maybe 61.8 could be a nice little pickup there for me on pound yen. Please remember, like I said, all of these are just my ideas and analysis. It is not me telling you what to do with your money. Forex is full of people who make it seem really easy or too good to be true. But please understand, if you're watching my channel, I'm here to tell you the truth. It is very difficult. And, just following or copying other people's trades is actually a path to almost perfect chance of failure. Now, I will just say for a quick second, I have that conversation occasionally. People are like, what do you mean, Nick? If you guys are like, if there's like a successful trader, shouldn't you just copy them and make money with them? And the answer is, on paper, it actually does make sense, but in actuality, it always fails, because people who know nothing about trading, when they just try and copy other people, when it's going well, what do? They end up doubling down, tripling their positions because they're like, man, this guy knows what he's doing. I'm just going to pile on money and he's going to make me rich. And then they blow their account with no proper risk management. On the flip side, when things go really poorly, let's say somebody calls out a long position here and you decide, I'm just going to blindly copy, and you have no idea why. And then they get stopped out. And then you're like, oh, this trader stinks. And you have no concept of, losses happen, right? It doesn't matter. It's kind of like running a business. If you're running a business, you have costs, you have expenses. Every business does. To act like a business has no expenses and just makes money all the time, never has lawsuits or issues or problems or expenses, is missing the whole picture. And so again, very, very important to understand that. No copying. Where I'm not big into copying other traders or anything like that, because I think that, like I said, I think you should understand what's going on under the hood if you're going to be driving your money around. That's a little analogy for your day. But anyways, when I'm looking at this thing, again, we do have some bearish structure here. We have some sellers that are strong here. Counter trend seems to be in control, at least for now. We will see if that continues next week, or I guess this week, or if we can actually see, a pull or a bounce back from all of this sell-off. So I'm watching the pound yen for sure. I think another one is pound Swiss franc is another interesting one. Pound Swiss franc, actually, never mind. It's pretty choppy here. Dollar Swiss franc might be interesting though. That's what I was looking for. This one broke out of a key range there. So what was now resistance, we got to start drawing as supply. I think one thing to note is you may get a little bit of pushback on a 50% retracement here. Actually, never mind. Sorry. The 50% retracement has already pretty much been broken there. But again, maybe 61.8, we could see a little bit of sell pressure. But again, for me, I think there's a lot of people who are rushing to try and short the dollar on this push up. And for me, that is just not what I'm interested in doing. I am interested in looking to go long with this thing, looking for the momentum change. We're seeing a lot of shift here. We're seeing price start to actually head up. We are back above the 200-day moving average. The moving averages are starting to line up, and price action is just looking bullish here on multiple time frames right now. So again, that's what I'm looking at on things like dollar Swiss. Let's take a look at gold here. We'll take a look at this ginormous, massive sell-off that we saw last week. Gold from the highs down just an incredible amount. That's an 8% move on the actual price of gold. That is pretty dang nasty. That's a crazy move there. So with gold, the question is it done? Is it going to keep going lower? I put a poll on my story. I said, is it going down further, or is it done? Is it going to bounce? And most people said it is going to continue lower. So again, with dollar bullishness coming in there, I wouldn't be surprised if we do see this thing keep going lower this week. But similar to the euro dollar, I made the point earlier that we had something to talk about with the gold market, just like the euro dollar. If this 61.8 level breaks, similar to the euro, I think a flush back down to the recent level of support there at 1680 could be a very, very big deal. So I think that, if we do see the breakout, maybe a long-term gold bull could be looking at something like picking up gold at 1680. That might be something to think about. I mean, that's a long-term low because you're talking about, we weren't back there until, what is that? Back in June of last year. So a year ago, we were at these levels. So we're seeing price really sell off. Pretty scary thing for gold, because again, we're putting in these lower highs, and that is a scary thing for, long-term buyers. It's looking very bearish right now. Things are looking very, very much to the downside, and like they want to continue lower. A big picture thing would be, if gold really does get bearish, you could even see a lower low. Again, if this trend continues, you're talking about a move past the lows at 1680 and maybe even down to a natural place like 1600. Very, very big sell-off there. Talking about like over a $300 dollar move on the price of gold. So very, very possible. I would not be surprised to see that happen, because again, that's sort of what the trend is telling us. Also have to do a similar thing like we did with the euro, which is identify these levels as supply, no longer as demand, right? So lots of sell pressure there, and a lot of places for sellers to try and continue this move lower. Even if we see a retracement, there are levels like 1800 and 1825 that both look like potential rally spots for sellers off the back of all this momentum. So again, I am bullish on the dollar, and that means that with gold, I'm not really looking to short it myself, but I would not put past the idea of selling or at least avoiding going long on this thing. So that's kind of my take on gold right now is bearish price action, bearish structure. Long-term trends are starting to pick back up to the downside. You could see we did finally get above that 200-day moving average, but then shot right back underneath it. So structure on the daily looking pretty bad for gold, at least for the bulls, in my opinion. Let's take a look at SPX 500 for a moment. This is the U.S. stock market. This thing took a dip last week, seeing its biggest sell-off in multiple months. You can see here. Still only down 2.5% or so off the highs. This thing truly has plenty of room to the downside should it want to come down. You can see we formed a low, or we formed a high here at 4,225, and then we sort of double top. It's an ugly one, but it's kind of close. It's a very weak higher high. But watching this thing this week will be very interesting to see, because there is one thing I want to point out. So the 200 is quite far away. Very natural place for price to pull back on the stock market is the 200 moving average. Let me show you this really quick. I always point this out because I thought this was so cool. So the 200 on something like the SPX 500 or just the US stock market is very interesting, because you can see it acts as a very, at least historically, a very nice dynamic level of support in an uptrend. You can see it tried to hold here, and then once it broke, it really, kind of saw some sell-off. Then bam, we're back above it. And look at this again and again, right around in that area, finding demand. So again, I think a natural place for price to pull back to would be a break back down to the 200 moving average, which looks something like this. You're talking about a pretty steep retracement there. So if that were to happen, maybe you find some support down at these levels here. But again, for me, I am bullish overall on this thing. But if I was to pick up positions or buy stocks or anything, I would need to see a pullback to the 200-day simple moving average. So that's what I'm looking at on this thing. If you draw a very ugly trend line, it looks kind of like this. We're pretty much at it right now. If you want to buy a lot of different standards of drawing it, that's pretty much where we're close to. So if we were to break underneath that, could see some short-term sell pressure on the S&P. So going to watch out for that. One more thing I want to take a look at, bonus market today, is going to be Bitcoin. Bitcoin really tumbling here last week, still struggling to get anywhere off of the lows here. We still have maintained the integrity of that 30,000 level, has not broken underneath it, but I will say that it is looking bearish. There's, lower highs coming in here, looking pretty unhealthy for the upside. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised now if price comes down to there to see a bust underneath 30,000. If that were to happen, you're talking about moves down to 20,000 as a next level of support. At least in my view, that is where I'd be interested. Just for fun, we'll take a look at Ethereum as well. Ethereum looking incredibly weak, incredibly bearish here, struggling to get underneath or to hold this area so far. We'll see if it can hold 2,000, or if 2,000 breaks, you're talking about way more downside, because this thing, similar to Bitcoin, can move up and down a lot, but it is not quite as favored as Bitcoin. There are arguments that people are like, it's going to overtake it and all this and that. But again, you're talking about crypto entering what looks to be, at least for now, a bearish market. Should we get under that 200, I think that's pretty much the nail in the coffin from a technical view. So we will see. A couple markets to watch for you guys. Thanks so much for tuning in to today's Sunday special. Again, before I go, I do want to remind you, 40% off our gold membership. It is linked down below in the description. If you want to join our Discord, you get access to all of the trade alerts that I take. So if I actually end up taking a position, you will see it. I share full details with every trade that I take. You get access to our chat room. You get access to our weekly in-depth research that we do, live coaching webinars, and of course, our strategy and software library for MetaTrader 4. With that said, you guys, thank you so much for being here. I hope you got something out of this week's Sunday special, and we will see you back